Hello, everyone. This is George Gutierrez from the BMAC Group, here again with Dr. Moore from Sterling Marketing and Management Consulting Company. I get that right. This is our third session, with Dr. Moore. Now, we're not going to talk about strategic planning today. We want to talk about challenges that startup companies continue to have and what we continue to see. So Dr. Moore, take it away.
Thank you, George. It's been wonderful to work with you on several companies, and many of them were startup companies. They're still in the startup phase, and during this process, and you've done many startup companies, and I've consulted with other ones outside of what we've been teaming on. I just want to talk about some of the challenges that we continuously see or face when it comes to these great ideas that are ready to be launched. And something that I continue to help guide the clients with, and that is, you can have the great innovation in the world, but if you don't have execution, that innovation will be nothing. And so we have a lot of individuals who come to us with these great innovations, but they lack the ability or understanding on how to execute it, which is why they hire us, which is why they look to us, is to help in that process. And so we start with the process of how to execute it, the little baby steps, the foundations that have to be done, and setting up and what we're hoping is going to be a very strong culture at the end of it. Then there is one more thing I would add is you've got innovation, you've got this great execution, we're headed that way. Neither one of those are going to work without leadership. You have to have good leadership in that position. You have to have individuals who are working towards being a great leader. So for those startup companies out there, that's one of the things I start with, and I'm not sure about you, George, but I always start with, let's talk about the innovation, let's talk about your execution, where we need to go, but then let's also put the leadership in there. How are we going to get there, and how are we going to build on that leadership?
Yeah, so this segment is packed with really with the depth of leadership and how it works and how it should work and how it's worked in the past. And what I continue to find is that leadership is often defined differently and understood differently by everyone. And so our growth, our mental and professional leadership development is shaped by our experiences and how we have gotten to where we are. So if you're going to talk to a guy like me that has a lot of military experience, then you'll see that my thinking has been shaped both experientially and academically through that prism. If you talk to somebody in the healthcare industry, you'll see that they look at leadership a little bit differently. They use a Hippocratic oath of do no harm. So that is how their thinking is shaped. So the challenge that I continue to see is that without leadership, without the proper leadership, then you're not going to get the right results that you're going to need on a startup. So what we continue to find and learn is that there has to be a good grasp of what it is that you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to know, and what you're supposed to do as a leader in the industry that you're in. So answering those questions, I think, is essential. The other part that you really brought to mind is the execution part of it. You can have all the strategies that you want to, and the last couple of sessions we talked about strategy at length. So yeah, it is essential to have a strategy, but remember that has to be executed by someone, not something, but by someone. So leadership is about people. It's about influencing people, and strategies are executed by people that have real feelings, that have real families, that have real needs. And so that loyalty that you're going to gain from those people, I think you alluded to it as culture. How does this leader develop a culture in an organization that commands sort of the loyalty of the people, to serve that organization? So execution is truly where it's at. Now, that's not something I said. That's something that I learned from General Colin Powell. So I'm quoting him. And so he was a great strategist. And one of the things I remember him saying was, execution is where it's at. Yeah. People is where it's at. So it's important, really, to learn about leadership perspective, to understand yourself as an individual and as a leader, as you grow your company. Now, let's go back to execution, because this is really not only essential, but it's also a problem. So from startup companies, what I continue to see is that they want to go straight into the execution.
Right.
And they start executing things without really having a strategy.
Right. They do, and they don't, and because they're so excited and passionate about it. And that's one of the things we love about startups is the passion that they have, and the ones that we've worked with have amazing innovation and products and programs and stuff, and it makes us excited. But in that excitement, sometimes they want to move too fast on the execution, and many times the strategy has to be slowed down. We have to make sure we're methodical, and part of the reason for that is because we're so focused on the culture and building a culture that can thrive and survive as you grow, and you don't want to grow too incredibly fast, because then your culture will be shaken a little bit by that as well. One of the things you mentioned on leadership too, I want to reiterate with a lot of individuals, is some people think that leaders are born and not made, and you can train to be a great leader. You can constantly perfect your leadership skills. It's not something that you're just born with. You might be born with charisma and a few other things that help in that process, but leadership is something that that can be built on, and you can study, and you can, like I said, perfect along the way. Management's something that's different than leadership. Management is managing processes, the execution, and so lots of times I have to sit back with the startup companies and explain a few of that to kind of put them into compartmentalize a little bit of it, so they understand that the leadership is all that human capital that's important about it, and the execution is all the management side, and how to be methodical in handling all of that. It's kind of a balancing act.
All right, so I think we've run out of time for today's segment, but you can see there's going to be a follow-on segment on leadership and management, because there's so much to it that I think is worth talking about. But for today's sake, let's kind of recap on the two more salient points that we talked about startups and some of the challenges that they face. Execution is where it's at, but you got to have a strategy. They both go hand in hand. Now, it's always better to be lucky than to be good, but most of us are not that lucky anyway, therefore you do need a strategy. Again, thank you for today. This is George Gutierrez from the BMAP Group, coming to you via Executive Exchange with Dr. Moore. Until next time.